The end of another month means another recreations video. Even though today's like December 1st or something, so it's like the start of the month actually, but you get the idea. Last month, I tasked all my subscribers with drawing their own original alien designs, and I chose a few of them that I really liked, and I'm going to be redrawing them today. So, let's see what the extraterrestrial world has in store for us. Let's create some chaos! The woman stumbled along the sidewalk, weary from the trip she'd just taken. Her body had moved before she could even consider the possible consequences of her actions. She didn't know how long it had been, but she now knew that hanging on to the outside of a truck for any length of time was not a good idea, especially when it was barreling down the highway while carrying a frightened creature as cargo. When the truck started to slow down, appearing to be closing in on its destination, Katie Damon released her grip, electing to tail the vehicle on foot the rest of the way so as not to draw any suspicion to herself. Unfortunately, her legs gave out as soon as they touched the pavement, and she collapsed, watching as the truck slowly drove away from her. It took her a few minutes of kneeling in the street before she finally got the use of her legs back. Though still a little shaky, she was able to walk. By that point, she had lost track of the truck, only knowing that it made a left turn after she dismounted from it. Katie kept moving, refusing to let the truck and the creature inside escape her. Unfortunately, even at the slow crawl the truck was moving, Katie couldn't find where it went. She did, however, finally take in her surroundings. To her surprise, the truck had driven into a fairly populated town. Small one-way streets snaked between rows of 2 to 3 story buildings that seemed to have residential apartments on top of local businesses. Katie looked around perplexed. It was entirely possible that the truck was slowing down as it passed through the town on the way to its real destination, but it really did seem like the truck intended to be in this town. If the latter was the case, why? What purpose did a truck holding an exotic creature have with a small town? The man in the tactical vest that captured the creature told her they wanted to run some tests on it after they separated it from the parasitic alien that had overrun the theme park that Katie worked at. She figured that was just a lie to get her to go away, but was there actually a lab in this town they were taking the creature to? Katie was about to give up and move on to her new mission of trying to find a way home, when a person across the street caught her eye. They passed by her by the time she turned around, so she only saw the back of their head, but she could have sworn it was one of the men from the truck. He wasn't in a tactical vest, so it was hard to know for certain, but she had a solid hunch. Katie turned around and began following the man from the other side of the street. The man walked for several blocks until they came upon a coffee house on a street corner. He sat down at a table and turned the waiter away when they tried to take his order. Katie watched the man from the bench across the street as he sat at the table, looking around the corner as if he was expecting someone. Eventually, another man came walking down the street, stopped at the coffee house, and joined the first man at the table. He held a cane and wore a heavy, high-collared coat that was making Katie sweat by just looking at it. They began chatting like they were old friends, and while Katie could have walked away and accepted that she most likely pegged the wrong person, her curiosity got the better of her, and she crossed the street towards the coffee house. She sat down at the table close enough for her to hear the two people talking, far enough away to not look suspicious in the otherwise empty outdoor seating area. Just like the man she followed, Katie turned away the waiter trying to take her order, feeling a little guilty when she heard them let out an annoyed sigh. She pushed the feelings aside and strained her ears to listen into the conversation. "This is not what we agreed upon," the older man with the cane said. "I was promised a beast, not a bubble-blowing good luck charm." "Things changed," the other replied. "The symbiote that the park had on display breached containment and infected the rest of the creatures there. Lost a lot of good men trying to even reach the bunker. So either take what we were able to get, or you walk away with nothing back to your oversized junk closet." Katie snapped out of her eavesdropping. The men in the truck were trying to enter the bunker where MSM Park kept all the creatures that were too dangerous to be out in public? She had taken her tour group there when the park was overrun by the Venom symbiote, in hopes that one of the creatures there could help them. Were those men after a specific creature from the bunker? Katie shook her head and went back to listening to the two men's conversation. Fine, the older man again. I'll take whatever you managed to get, but you're only getting half the price we previously agreed on. The first man didn't argue. Maybe it was because if the second man refused, he wouldn't know what to do with the creature, or simply there were just now less men from the truck that needed to be paid. Very well. Come to this location at midnight and we'll hand over the cargo. Katie risked a glance at the table and saw the first man slide something over to the older one. She craned her neck slightly, but couldn't make out what was on it. But if I meet you there, the older man wasn't done just yet. How will I get it back to my collectionary? I'm sure you'll figure it out. See you at 12. With that, the first man got up and walked back the way he came. The older man, however, stayed at the table for longer than Katie expected. She didn't know where the two men were meeting later, or what this collectionary was, but one way or another, she was going to free that creature. The town was much bigger than Katie initially thought. She never found the rendezvous point of the creature handoff the night she tailed the man from the truck. And on top of that, it took her a few days to figure out what the older man's collectionary was, never mind where it was actually located. She roamed the town for several days asking if anyone knew of an older man who collected creatures, but because she was still in her tattered and worn MSM Park uniform, most people avoided eye contact with her. She was left with two options: find a way to appear presentable, or find the older man herself. Oddly enough, she found the latter option was the easier one. Katie started her own search by camping outside the coffee house where she first saw the two men, expecting the older one to return. When he didn't show, she opted to walk down the street that he came from. She looked at the buildings on both sides of the street, seeing if any of them bore any signs that would point her in the right direction. While she didn't find anything on the buildings themselves, she did come across a small plastic sign stuck in the dirt that read, Ivan Aklu's Collectionary of the Mysterious, with a list of hours that it was open, and at the very bottom of the sign it read, Interested? Just turn around. Katie did as the sign said and found herself looking at a small and rather unassuming building. There was no indication that it was the place where the creatures would be held in containment. In fact, if she hadn't seen the sign, Katie would have just assumed it was another residential building. Although she didn't know what time it was exactly, she assumed it was somewhere within the collectionary's hours of operation. She figured it'd be a lot easier to free the creature when no one was around, and decided to come back at night. A few street lamps lit the road as Katie walked back to the collectionary. Since she didn't have any info about the inside of the building, she resigned to just using the front door. As expected, it was locked for the night, but to Katie's surprise, gave away with just a little bit of force. The first floor of the building was a small hallway cluttered with boxes and a thin staircase leading upwards. Climbing the stairs, Katie found that the second floor was a much more open space, or at least it was supposed to be. Rows of glass cases and display stands were packed together, with spaces just barely big enough that a person could walk between them. Even in the darkness, Katie could see that most of the cases were empty or contained objects so small that they looked empty. She carefully made her way through the rows, searching for a case or cage big enough to hold the creature from MSM Park. Although she could easily see the entire room from one wall to the other, she didn't see anything that would immediately clue her into the creature's whereabouts. Katie continued her search, peering into a display case every so often to see what was in it. She'd be lying to herself if she said the cases didn't pique her interest. She was looking at what appeared to be a dried-out tentacle when a familiar voice rang out in the back of her head. So that's it. You've given up on your heroic rescue mission to look at garbage. Katie tried to ignore the voice and continued searching, but that did little to stop it. I wouldn't worry about that beast. Even if you don't save it, it'll be just another dead thing for you to ogle at. Shut up! Katie swung her arm around, swinging at the voice she knew wasn't actually there. Unfortunately, her arm made contact with one of the glass cases and it fell over, shattering on the ground. Almost instantaneously, a garbled bark echoed from the far corner of the room, and Katie guessed that's where she needed to go. Snaking her way through the rest of the cases, being sure not to knock over any more, Katie made her way to the back of the room. Tucked in the corner was a sizable cage, and inside the cage was the pink and blue creature that Katie had been trailing since it was taken from MSM Park. The creature was noticeably distressed from the sound of the glass shattering, clawing at the cage, trying to dig its way out. "It's okay, buddy." Katie knelt down and began fiddling with the lock on the cage door. "I'm gonna get you out of here." She continued trying to open the lock, but it wouldn't budge. With the creature so close to the door and in a frantic state, she didn't want to try to break it by kicking at it. It became clear that there wasn't much she could do without the actual key. "Come on! Why won't this stupid thing budge?" "Because you aren't meant to open it." Katie turned around, and standing behind her was a hulking mechanical figure. The light reflecting off of its green visor made it hard for Katie to tell if there was a person inside it or if it was just an automated machine. Whatever it was, it raised its arm and whacked Katie on the head, knocking her out. Katie awoke to find herself in the dark void once again. She looked around frantically, waiting for her haunting counterpart to show her all the mistakes she's made. But nothing happened. Instead, Katie spotted the woman in the wispy red dress standing far in the distance. The woman did nothing, and barely made any acknowledgement to Katie. "Go on!" Katie clenched her fists as she began shouting at the wispy woman. "Show me all the things I've done wrong. Tell me that no matter what I do, I'll always be the same selfish person." The figure just continued to stand there as Katie heaved, trying to catch her breath. She refused to take her eyes off the woman, afraid she'd disappear if she wasn't being constantly watched. Katie waited for something to happen, but no matter how much time passed, the woman in red was as still as a statue. Suddenly, a white light began to fill the void, and Katie knew that she was returning to consciousness. She took a deep breath and readied herself for wherever she might wake up. The figure was too far away to know for certain, but right before the void faded completely, Katie could have sworn she saw the figure's face lift into a smile. Not one of malice, but of pride. Katie snapped back to the real world, staring at the ceiling. She sat up and saw that she was laid out on a bed in a rather small room. It was about as wide as a closet, but long enough to move around a bit. Or at least it would have been if any free bit of floor space wasn't covered by boxes and display cases that had tarps placed over them. Her head was still throbbing, but Katie got out of bed and carefully made her way to the door on the other side of the room. She was about to open it when she heard a voice coming from the other side of the door. It was muffled, but she could somewhat make out what was being said. "Thank you all for joining me today. Take care, everyone." The faint sound of a door closing was followed by slow but ever louder footsteps. The footsteps got closer and closer to the door, and Katie backed away before it swung open, revealing the older man she saw at the coffee house days ago. "Oh, good. You're awake. Come, Katie. I'd like to talk to you." Katie was about to ask the man how he knew her name, until she looked down and remembered she was still wearing her MSM Park uniform, which, despite being almost literally dragged through the mud, still bore her embroidered name on the chest. She slumped her shoulders and followed the man into the larger room she had been in the night before. The light of the day gave Katie a better look at the rows and rows of cases. Every case with an object had a plaque with information about it, as well as a small box labeled suggestions. The cases and displays varied in size, with smaller ones holding one or two objects filling the center of the room, and the larger ones lining the walls. Against one of the walls, Katie saw the mechanical suit that had knocked her out. "That is called a Zeknek suit," the old man said, not looking at either Katie or the display case. "Believe it or not, it used to be in one of the center floor cases." How? Katie found it hard to believe that such a big thing could fit inside of the small glass cases that were lined in the center. More so, she was trying to figure out why the man was being so kind to her. She broke into his, what she believed to be, home, broke one of the cases, and tried to free the creature he had. The Zeknek suit was originally a small cube when I found it. It didn't do much for the first month or two, but at some point while I was cleaning the displays, it expanded into what you see now and started cleaning the displays as well. Scared me half to death when it first happened.
So that thing is alive?
Katie's fist clenched. How many live beings had this man stolen from other places? Yes and no. The man spoke without his tone ever changing. I've discovered that this suit is able to move and operate on its own, implying some level of sentience, but it is not alive in the same way that you and I are. And as the suit in the name suggests, it can be worn by a person it deems acceptable. Katie nodded as she continued to stare at the suit. It was only when she heard the sound of a lock that she looked back around the room and saw the man crouched beside the caged creature from the previous night, with a key in one hand and the lock in the other. The creature walked out of the cage and made its way over to Katie, nestling against her leg. I do apologize. I heard about the catastrophe that went down at MSM Park, and I'm sorry your pet got caught up in the chaos. Though I would have appreciated it if you came to me during my hours of operation to ask for them back, rather than breaking in. Katie stared at the creature, surprised at how easy the rescue turned out to be. She was about to leave with her new pet, when she remembered something the man at the coffee house said.
Why were the men you hired trying to reach MSM's bunker? That place is off limits and not even public knowledge.
I didn't hire anyone to do anything. I got an anonymous call one day from someone saying they were interested in my collectionary and could provide me with a live subject for the right price. I intended to ask the man what the bunker was, but he wasn't the type for conversation.
Then why accept in the first place if you didn't know where they were getting it from?
Because any opportunity for knowledge is an opportunity I will pursue. When Katie didn't say anything, the man continued. There is an ever-expanding universe of life and culture that many can only dream about. I've dedicated my life to preserving the exotic knowledge of the universe beyond our world.
But why? Why crowd your entire house with all this stuff?
The man didn't answer her immediately. Instead, he made his way over to a case and motioned Katie to join him. Katie did so with the creature trailing behind her. When she joined him at the case, she saw a humanoid-looking skull wearing a nurse's hat and surrounded by green and blue tentacles. This is why.
Are you going to finish your thought?
You were supposed to be reading the Never mind. This is Chio. She came from a planet that was dying of hunger. That was, until they got visitors from other planets. The inhabitants of Chio's planet began kidnapping and eating any extraterrestrial visitors that they received. The only one who didn't was Chio, who was a nurse because...
Because? Where's the rest of the story?
Exactly. No one knows. It's been lost to time. The end of Chio's story and what she did to combat an entire planet that resorted to desperate measures will forever remain a mystery. I was able to preserve what I can and keep it here, in the hopes that it will inspire someone to follow my footsteps and keep the pursuit of knowledge alive.
I see. So you're running a sort of alien museum here. If that's the case, why do you call it a collectionary? Also, what is a collectionary?
Museums aren't exactly known for their excitement. Adding mysterious to the title adds a little suspense and draws in a crowd.
So what did you do to get all these artifacts?
Do you just wait around for anonymous people to call you? Not quite. I chose to set up here because this area is unusually hot in alien activity. Most of these artifacts I've dug up myself in the surrounding area.
if you've dug up all of these yourself, how do you know so much about all the species? Surely fossils can't tell you everything about a species.
Not everything, but cells, bones, and organs all tell a story. You just have to put them together.
Interesting.
Katie looked around the room, trying to see if there was any type of equipment that could indicate some kind of scientific analysis. She didn't see any immediately, but figured they may be in one of the many boxes scattered through all the rooms. She looked and noticed that the man wasn't by her anymore. Instead, he had moved over to the Zeknek suit display and had pulled open the case door. The suit stepped out of the case and slumped over as its back opened up, waiting for the man to climb in. Well, thank you for chatting with me. I trust you know your way out? I'd say lock up when you're done, but my front door lock has been broken.
Where are you going?
Off to search through a new area. I've heard rumors from people that they've seen something passing over the town the other night and landing somewhere west of here. There just so happens to be a swamp in that direction, which would be the perfect place for a visitor to hide out.
So then why the suit?
There have been some interesting whispers going around. Apparently, people that have gone into the swamp have seen 6 glowing purple eyes, and there have been reports of people becoming rash and violent before dropping dead. So I figured a little protection couldn't hurt. The man climbed into the suit, and the back of it closed. He began moving towards the door when Katie called out, "Wait!" The man turned to look at her. As he did, Katie realized what she was about to ask and got a little flustered.
That sounds kinda cool. Maybe I can tag along? If you don't mind the company, that is.
The suit stood perfectly still, to the point where Katie wasn't sure the man even heard her, but eventually the suit nodded. That would be nice. Don't expect me to protect you, though.
After dealing with what happened at MSM Park, I think I'll be fine.
Katie made her way through the rows of glass cases and joined up with the man.
Oh, I don't think I caught your name, by the way.
Again, the man didn't immediately answer, but eventually he said, "You can call me Ivan a Clue." I'll admit, trying out a new art program for the first time for a community recreations video was a little bit nerve-wracking. But after all said and done, I'm actually really happy with how all the art turned out in this episode. And hopefully as time goes on, I'll get more and more comfortable with Clip Studio Paint and things will look even better. And there we go, another recreation series and another Ivan a Clue plus Katie Damon story. It took a little bit, admittedly, to get both of these narrators going off the ground, but I'm really excited for where their story's going. I got the ideas now. I know how they're going to play out, and I know what's going to happen, and I'm really excited to share them. So stay tuned for those in the next coming little while. I don't know how long it's going to be. And thank you to everybody who submitted. There were so many good options to choose from, and a special thank you and congratulations to those who were chosen. Apple Flavors, Frederick, and Abigail Hosanna. And now, for the final time this year, a prompt that would have worked a lot better in October, but the December 2024 KyngPin Recreations prompt, design your own folklore monster. Or just monster in general. Something along the lines of werewolves, vampires, swamp men, things like that. It could either be a variation on an already existing type of monster, like the ones I just mentioned, or it can be completely original from the ground up. Please provide a full body and a headshot of your drawing, as well as any lore, abilities, and story you feel are necessary for me to understand your character. As always, all the other information is on the screen, including due date and submission details, and I can't wait to see what you got. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit the like and subscribe button, and if you want, we have more Ivan a Clue stories up top, or if you want to figure out what the heck was going on before this story happened, you can check out Katie Damon stuff here on the bottom. That's all I've got for you today. My name is KyngPin Creation, and I'll see you all next time. Take care, everybody.